Hey guys, it's Christopher Tom here, and today I want to talk about Shane Dawson's new series, The Mind of Jake Paul. Ever since Shane initially announced the series, a lot of people weren't really happy about the idea, to say the least. Some people were frustrated that Shane was giving Jake a platform in the first place, because no matter the amount of videos that have been made exposing Jake Paul, he always still seems to come out on top in terms of views and subscribers. It seems like no amount of exposed videos seems to have that much of a negative impact on Jake's audience. And I think a big part of that is because the type of demographic that Jake's content appeals to, which would be little kids, is so far removed from the rest of YouTube that no amount of commentary videos is really going to make a dent in his following.
This is for all the Jake Paulers. We run the game, I love you. My fans so fly, I don't know why they all be rocking gold. They go to work, they buy their merch.
I don't think anyone here goes to work. We do have child labor laws, Jake. So for a while, Jake Paul was one of the most relevant and talked about YouTubers. However, that's starting to change, since Shane is now a lot more popular and relevant than Jake is currently, so people were afraid Shane would just be giving Jake unneeded attention. They were also afraid that Shane might try to portray Jake in a positive or sympathetic light, kinda like what Shane did with a series about Jeffree Star. Shane isn't really known for making harsh or scathing videos, they're more so the type of videos that are like, hey, this person isn't really that bad. But I don't really believe Shane has any intention of portraying Jake in a positive light, especially considering the backlash he would get from doing that. In fact, there was even enough backlash from the announcement alone that Shane addressed in the video how despite all of the controversial figures he's had on, Jake was the most controversial.
When I tweeted that I would be interested in doing it, the backlash I got was crazy. This was like, Shane, if you do this, we will unsubscribe. We don't want to be a part of this.
And I can understand that because Jake Paul is one of the most hated and generally disliked people on the entire site. Like, a lot of people just can't stand him. I saw a lot of angry comments from people, like, I'm unsubscribing if he does this series. We don't want this! And a lot of these comments were made before Shane even released anything. I mean, you can't complain about something you haven't even seen. Like, at least give the guy a chance, you know? I get it, dude. People don't like Jake Paul. They don't want to see him, they don't want to think about him. But to just make a blanket dismissal of this content because you don't like Jake Paul is a bit silly. Hey, I don't like this Jake Paul guy. He's not a nice person. That's the point. And that's part of why it's so interesting to find out what's going on in his head. That's why it's called The Mind of Jake Paul. There's a part in the video where Shane talks about how he was planning to make a video about sociopaths in general, and everything just sort of aligned with the conception of this series. Because there's a lot of people who are genuinely wondering, is Jake Paul a sociopath? Or at the very least, does he express the qualities of one? Now, Shane first expressed his interest in doing a video with Jake Paul a little over 2 months ago on Instagram when he said, I would love to just follow him around for a day and see what his life is like. I'm very fascinated by him. How much of his life is real and how much is an act? What's his family life like? Does he date? Does he have real friends off camera? Does he actually have that much money, or is that house rented? And these are great questions to ask, because in the lifespan of YouTube, we've never seen anyone quite like Jake Paul in the way he acts or the things he does. The psychological side of things has always been something that interested me. Personally, I always wonder what brings people to do the things they do, and why are people the way they are? And given what we've seen so far, since we know Shane is going to directly interview a lot of the people who have interacted with Jake Paul and have been directly affected by his actions, it seems like he might have some intriguing insight regarding the mind of Jake Paul. It will also be interesting to see how much of this is a character and how much of it is actually his personality. We've already established that Jake Paul's audience is essentially made up of little kids, but what separates Jake and Logan Paul from the other, let's call them children's entertainers, is when you're watching a show on Nickelodeon, you know when somebody is just playing a character. You understand that Miranda Cosgrove isn't actually Carly, and Miley Cyrus isn't actually Hannah Montana. But on YouTube, that's where the line begins to blur. YouTubers are basically portraying an altered version of themselves to the camera, and it can be hard for younger viewers to distinguish their real-life persona from how they act in videos. And of course, it's worth taking a look at Jake's family. Their dad, Greg Paul, is a controversial figure himself. In fact, he recently had a sex tape controversy that I'm not going to get into, and we don't know just how much Jake was influenced by his older brother Logan, who was arguably worse depending on who you talk to. Now, of course, none of this should be a justification, but at the very least, it might provide a possible explanation, which is the entire point. So Shane has just released the first part of this 8-part series, The Mind of Jake Paul. It's about 40 minutes long, and the purpose of the video is basically to provide some context and backstory to what we're about to delve into, because the whole Jake Paul lore is very extensive. There's seriously so much to cover. It goes over Jake's terrible treatment of Alyssa Violet, his terrible treatment of Team 10 members, the time Jake falsely accused FaZe Banks of assault, and just Jake being a general nuisance. And it did a great job covering all these events, and Shane in general is fantastic, not just at building hype, but in making these videos in a way that attracts the attention of the average viewer. But not everybody was satisfied. There was some criticism. That Shane Dawson video was just a really long teaser trailer with no actual new content. I get he needs clicks and views, but this can easily be edited down to be less self-indulgent. And I don't really agree with that. I mean, the average person isn't exactly an expert on Jake Paul lore, and they might not be familiar with a lot of these events. Like, I might be familiar with it, but that doesn't mean everyone else is. So I see it as Shane is just going over important events in this whole Jake Paul timeline in order to give people important context before we go any further. And considering the fact that this is going to be 8 parts, I'd say we definitely need the context. But despite the fact that there was a lot of backlash around the idea, now that it's actually out, clearly there was a lot of people who did want to see this. And a lot of people like it, and I gotta say it is a very smart concept for a series. And I think Shane will do a pretty balanced and fair job covering this. But that's just my take on it. Let me know what you think in the comments. Anyway, that's about it for this video. Hope you liked it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Yeah.